All right, everybody. Happy March to you all. We are now past St. Patrick's Day, and we are ready to dig back in on our attacker's journey with one of our own, Noah King, who is started this journey last week, if you remember, where he, as a web developer, started looking at what this attack thing is, the part of the company that he's with, on how are people trying to attack what he's developing. And we started last week with Log4Shell, and he was able to build out his own range, attack with Log4Shell, that own logging function, and show how he knew it was successful. He was joined by Chris Pruitt from MRK Technologies. And this week, we have another great mentor who has been pen testing for quite a while and who has been knee deep in risk with Echelon Risk. Good morning, Jake. How are you doing today, man?
Thank you, Monty. I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
Good deal. Thank you very much for joining. I'm going to turn it over to you in just a second. I want to make sure everybody out there knows that as we're going, you won't be able to have your video on or your voice on. So please submit your questions into that Q&A box. We can't wait to answer your questions. We'll do that throughout the different casts today. And we want to make sure that you get to ask the expert, Jake, as well as the newbie, Noah, anything you want about the attacking, the ranges they're doing, how they came to do this. So please fire away with that. And Jake, if you wouldn't mind doing a quick introduction and telling us a little bit about your story as a pen tester, web app du jour, go for it, brother.
Sounds great. So, hey guys, I'm Jake Murphy. I'm an offensive security consultant at a company called Echelon Risk and Cyber. I've been involved in web testing and pen testing as a whole for, I think it's been 8 years now. So I'm super excited to be here. Of all the vulnerabilities out there, SQL Injection is my absolute favorite. So good topic, fits well with me. Super excited to really dig into this with you guys. So with that, I'll pass it off to Noah King, who'll be taking the reins in the demo today.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. So if anybody doesn't know me, let me go ahead and give another introduction. My name is Noah King. I'm one of the engineers here at Horizon 3, actually celebrating my second year with Horizon 3 today. So great timing. Excited that everybody can join. A little bit of background. I'm mainly a software engineer building web applications, working on the web side of things. And I just got interested. I started to get a spark into cybersecurity, started following that journey. How do I learn? What do I do? Like, where do you begin from? And it's just great to have you here, Jake, and kind of get to ask you a lot of questions that I think a lot of people are wondering in general, because we have people from all different types of walks of life, all different backgrounds. Some people are developers, maybe they're IT admins, network engineers, whatever. So this is just a good way for us to share industry knowledge. I got a couple of questions, and I thought we could maybe start off that way, and then we can go into a demo and we can talk about that, and we'll do a live SQL injection. So make sure you keep around for that. We'll do a SQL injection here in a minute. But Jake, how did you kind of get started in hacking? Like, what was the spark for you and got you into this industry?
Great question. So I started programming back in the 7th grade. So I was 12 years old. I just fell in love with computers and programming. A few years of that went by and I found cybersecurity, and I kind of fell in love with that too. So it was interesting to see both routes kind of come together. And I remember I think it was junior year of high school. I must have been 16. I found United Airlines bug bounty program. And that was the first time that I actually found I could make money off of hacking and cybersecurity. And, when a 16-year-old finds a way to make money, it's good motivation, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of really spurred me to get even more into it. And all through the college years, I had internships, and I co-founded a software development company, and that's kind of how I got my start. So now I decided I want to go more into web testing. That's the route that I'm happiest in now.
Yeah. So tell me more about this bug bounty. I think I heard you have 70 plus bugs that you found on production applications, other companies where you've hacked them and they've paid you?
Yeah, so like I said, I started with United Airlines. I was watching the news and it came up that United Airlines was paying freelance hackers to look at their systems. And I was like, oh, wow, this is really cool. So I started reading reports online and I found two platforms. One's BugCrowd and the other is HackerOne.
Mm-hmm.
And both companies specialize in having a large amount of usually Fortune 500 companies join their platform, and they'll pay hackers to submit reports in certain scopes. So you can actually go on just as any individual without any certifications and create an account, can take a look at these systems and report on what you find. And depending on the severity, you'll get compensated for it. So it's a great way to learn, and that's definitely what I have to thank for my start.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. I got to imagine when you were doing these bug bounties and you're hacking into this airline and everything, and the moment that you get in and you have some kind of bug, some security vulnerability, it must have been some type of rush. Like, wow.
Oh, it was incredible. I remember, this was back in high school. I had just finished football practice and I go run off the field and I check my phone and I see an email that a company paid me $3,000 for something that took 45 minutes to find and report. So it was definitely a rush, and it was a good few years for me in high school there. I might have peaked early.
That's insane. I couldn't imagine coming into that kind of money and that kind of skill at such a young age. So that's awesome. Really cool. And for other people that don't know that are on the talk, a bug bounty, from what I understand it's just these companies, they let you hack them. And if you report it to us, we're going to pay you, because I rather you tell me that you hacked me in a safe, controlled way and I fix it, versus letting some malicious hacker take that and do something that's even more costly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. That's a good deal. A couple of other questions. So let's talk about web for a start, because web is at least where I've gotten into hacking as a starting point. And I think if you're a web developer, you're writing code every day for a company, that was at least the point for me to kind of get into it. And because there's a lot of things you can do. You can break into a login page, all those different things. Why did you choose web as the area of your expertise? Because there's a lot of different hacking areas, right?
Yeah. So my first start in web, I think I was around 19. I had a LinkedIn account and I was pretty active on it. And I had a Chick-fil-A franchise owner reach out to me, and he was wanting someone to build a website for him. I had never done anything web-wise at that point, but I told him yes. I was like, I'll build it for you. Give me a couple grand. So, after that, we had an agreement. We met up. I really got into web development, and I had no clue what I was doing. The first product I made for him was terrible. But that was kind of my shoe in the door. And from there, we went through a couple iterations. He really pushed me to make him a good product. And, a year went by and I studied pretty much 8 or 9 hours a day outside of school at that point. That's kind of when I learned the development side of things, which, when I paired that with my previous hacking knowledge, it kind of grew my understanding. So in combination, I think, like you said, you're coming from a development perspective and I'm more of a testing perspective, but really they work great together. Because at the end of the day, you want to write secure code, and I want to make sure that applications online are secure. So it's great to have that harmony there.
Yeah, definitely agree. And it sounds like you've been working on web and you've been slowly increasing your skill set and working with different tools. And you recently picked up a pretty prestigious certificate for web app pen testing. What was that like? Because it seems like a lot of hackers and everything, they go after these certifications, and it's kind of like one way to get your foot in the door. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So I found out, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I passed my EWPTX, which stands for eLearn Security Web Penetration Tester Extreme. It's a mouthful, but it's basically an expert level exam where you have to not only know how to exploit difficult vulnerabilities, but you have to bypass pretty advanced firewalls and features. And it definitely pushed me to, first off, know what I was doing, and second off, find ways to bypass systems and bypass those WAFs. So I definitely learned so much through doing that, and I highly recommend the EWPTX if you're looking to grow your knowledge, or if you're just beginning. They have a certification called EWPT, so it's a little more beginner oriented. It's a great way to kind of get your foot in the door to web testing, and I think it's $400. So $400, you purchase that, and then you do some bug bounties. Yeah, pay for itself, right?
Or get your company to pay for it.
Even better.
Then you get it for free. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like it. All right. So speaking of web app pen testing and all of this different security, it seems like security is all over the news these days. The US is on high alert. All these countries are on high alert, worried about everything that's just in the landscape of the world today. Getting hacked, getting your data stolen, getting ransomware, whatever it may be. Log4Shell, we talked about that one in the prior Tech Talk. But today, let's talk about SQL injections. Some background for people. I'm also a web development instructor at a boot camp, and we were actually, perfect timing, just taught SQL last week. And so I think this is a very good time to really talk about what is a SQL injection like. Give me your expert definition.
Yep.
Explain it to me like I'm 5. What's a SQL injection?
I'll do my best. So as a developer, a lot of times if you're building an application, you need to utilize a backend database. And within the database, that's where you're going to put information you want to save. So usernames, passwords, credit card numbers, all stuff hackers, attackers, all stuff they want to access, right? So it's definitely kind of one of the first things we're going to look for. We're trying to gain access to that information. But developers will take user input either from get or post parameters. And take that and they'll use it in a query. And it's a SQL query that will actually save it to the database. So SQL is kind of the language used to interact with and save data to the backend database. So as attackers, what we're trying to do is break into those queries and add our own commands in them. So that way we can access and pull data from the backend. And like I said before, that's where you have your juicy information, your passwords, user emails, all that's going to usually be found there.
Yeah, it sounds like, just in general, everybody's building full stack applications. You have a front end, you got a server, and you got a database. And where does all the data live? It lives in a database. So it seems like the primary target is, let me go get all that data. Let me steal all your data, or let me jump onto that database as the user. And then maybe I can get into the server, pivot, go around and do next level things. So overall, it sounds like SQL injection is a very common vulnerability that.
Yeah, I would say with the web tests I do, usually 1 in 10 will find SQL injection, which, considering its critical severity, that's pretty often, 10% of the time. So it's out there. You just have to look.
And what's interesting, Jake, is when you look at the OWASP 10, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, for almost 5 years, SQL injection was the #1 on the OWASP 10. They just redid the OWASP 10, and it bounced down to 3, and now includes cross-site scripting there. But they still talk about all the CWEs that are mapped into injection having the second most occurrences in applications now, and that this is something that is pretty familiar with. And I think that really lends the relevance as well as why this is a great place for Noah to start, for you to be able to mentor, is to show that even across some of the compliance and the certification measures, this is one of those high level things that is a great place for somebody who's just breaking into this area to start.
Yeah, definitely. And it can be an easy mistake to make, right? As a developer, if you forget to sanitize one parameter, can end up with a hacker in your database. So
yeah, it sounds like a pretty nasty vulnerability that you don't want to happen. And the thing that we have to think about too as web developers. So if you're that developer that's writing that code, that front end, that server, that's saying select all from the database or insert into the database, it just takes one spot for a hacker to get in. You know, you might be good 99% of the time and you're protecting yourself, but then, you know, you hire a new developer, they didn't follow the coding practices and they weren't aware. And then now you got a vulnerability in your code base.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think this might be a good time. I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen and we'll talk about some of these SQL injections and kind of how we hunt for them in the wild, how a hacker is going to look for them and then use them to their advantage. So let me share my screen real quick.
Sounds great.
Let me get some confirmation from you or Monty. Y'all can see my screen, correct?
Yep, I can see it.
All right. So the first thing is I had to, of course, showcase my hack the box. That's my starting point. So if you're a developer, you're new to cybersecurity, you want to get into it, you don't know where. I didn't know where. I went to Hack the Box. And again, I'll always recommend it. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I just love the platform. The UI is nice. I like building nice modern UIs. So this is great. Starting point is a really good spot. It will hold your hand. It will give you walkthroughs, how to hack something. What's also cool about Hack the Box and what I like and what has motivated me to keep pushing and to keep learning is it gives me different titles. Right now, I'm still a script kiddie. I'm 79% there to being a hacker. I'm so close. And I was trying to get my hacker rank this weekend, but I didn't get the last box. But next Tech Talk, we should be at hacker status. So if you haven't checked it out, check that out. It's a pretty cool, awesome thing. But let's dig into how we're going to do a SQL injection today. What I've stumbled upon, what I've found in my research and my learning is just like a newbie. And, anybody can do this. This is what's happening out there all the time in the real world. The first place that I started at is, of course, I talked to all of our expert hackers, here at Horizon 3. I'm always looking for guidance. What should I do? What are the most important things to look for? And they all recommended like a SQL injection. SQL injection is really common and it's a good place to start. And they recommended this website, the National Vulnerability Database. And it looks like it's maintained by the US government. And this is a database full of different applications, third-party tools, anything that's vulnerable to weaknesses. Jake, do you use this website a lot or come in here?
I've used it before. I use, personally, I like the exploit DB. But with these kind of exploits, oftentimes if I find a website or a service running on a port, I'll try to enumerate that version number and then just hit it with a Google. And then depending on what comes up, I can kind of go through it. So I try not to limit anything to just one resource. But this is definitely a very useful one, like you said.
Yeah. And at least what's kind of cool about it, there is a search where you can search for different things. And I just did a keyword search for SQL injection. And I started looking through the list of what tools, what third parties are vulnerable to SQL injections. And eventually I landed on this company called Fuel CMS. So if I search for that one, you'll see Fuel shows up in here a lot. And these are all pretty high critical vulnerabilities. Version 150 is vulnerable to a SQL injection. 150, 148, 1411, 147. It seems like a lot of versions, even as they're patching and doing things, they're vulnerable. So I started looking into this company. And if you look it up, here's their website, Get Fuel CMS. You can download all the code and set up your own CMS. It's open source code. And the first thing that kind of stuck out to me is just, okay, so there's tools out there, there's third-party code we can download, we can start running and using in our corporation, the company we work for, picking something off the shelf, because I don't have time to write all of this. So I'm going to pick something off the shelf. But there is security vulnerabilities, there's threats available. And so I started looking through, and I just went into these different ones, and I think 147 was the one that I landed on. And I started reading, this allows a SQL injection through the call parameter, the column parameter on the pages items, permissions items, nav items. Said, all right, how can I do this myself? The next thing that I basically did is I just went to their GitHub. I downloaded the version that I wanted. They do have a version 151. That's kind of the newest one. But what I thought was interesting as I was looking through their code is how many times they mentioned the word security. Security fix, version 150. Critical security update, security patch. And if you just keep looking, everything's like a security fix. And it just kind of blew my mind that this company is struggling a lot with security issues. And now if I can exploit it, this is probably what a malicious hacker is doing. They're going to go look for people out there in the world that use this tool. And then I've recreated that SQL injection locally. Let me go after some companies that use this tool. Is that kind of the approach that you see a lot of times, or what you think bad actors are doing?
Oh yeah, I know there was just some issue with service that was related to Tesla Motors, and a hacker found a vulnerability within it or affecting it, and they were able to use, I believe it was Shodan, to search for like 50 other servers that were also vulnerable. So, if it's existing online, assume somebody's already found it and someone's hacking it. So it's that shows the importance of, updating and patching, and how it has to be a priority.
Yeah, I think that's also a good side note. Like in general, I always look at when I'm talking to my students or I'm talking to friends and I'm looking at people's computers, I always see the little, you need to update, or you need to update your software. Always update stuff. There's always vulnerabilities coming in. So make sure you're protecting yourself and running those updates, because there are security fixes that come in. So yeah, that's cool. That's good to kind of confirm. Let's go ahead. Let's kind of switch over. Let's do the live SQL injection and everything. So I'm running a virtual machine here on my MacBook. I'm running Parrot OS. If you're not really big on hacking or cybersecurity, it's just a Linux distribution for hackers. It's got a lot of hacking tools. There's also Kali. I'd be curious, Jake, do you like Kali, Parrot? Like, what do you use? What's your daily driver?
I used Kali, but I have nothing against people who choose Parrot. I think at the end of the day, it's just where you're more comfortable. And I grew up kind of using Kali. Like I said, I started early in this process, so I just am too stubborn to change at this point, I'd say. But at the end of the day, if you can run your tools on it, that's kind of what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so check this out. I went out to Linode. I went out to one of these, cloud architecture providers, and I spun up a server. And I took that code from Fuel CMS to run their app. And I made some fictitious company. I kind of just deployed it. It's out there in the world. And I called it Contoso Web. Let's just imagine this is, a $1 billion company. And I'm going to exploit them through this loophole. So I got this website here. And when I was looking back at the National Vulnerability Database, once I had it all spun up, they said the column parameter on pages items, permission items, or nav items. So naturally, I just went to that URL, and you can see we're on /pages. If I throw /items in, it just redirects back to here. But I have it running. And the first thing that I wanted to do as a hacker is I want to capture all these network requests that are happening under the hood. Because if I sort this column back and forth, or I search for some data, these are all different pathways or opportunities for me to provide data that travels from the front end to the server, eventually to the database. So maybe, you know, my first thought would be like, maybe I could SQL inject this, select all from users or something here. That's a common approach from what I've seen. People usually try to manipulate and play with the inputs and kind of what's being sent. Do you start there?
Typically, I like to get Burp Suite up and running, and then I'll log into the application and I will just use it. I find that it's important to get a feel for the application before you actually move into the hacking part. I like to figure out.
Can you explain Burp Suite real quick, Jake, just for those who may not know? Can you just give a quick intro for it here?
So Burp Suite's a proxy tool, and it's kind of the go-to tool for web hackers. There's so many different things you can do with it, but we'll focus on the proxy feature for now. So you set up your browser to run all its traffic through Burp Suite, and you can see all the requests being issued by the application. And so not only that, you can actually repeat the requests and try to play with them, try to enter injections, try to enter all sort of different things to kind of trigger the application to give you data. So you can see here, captured a GET request to the server, and you have the option to forward, drop, intercept, or send it to a different tool. And you see that top bar, that's kind of a darker gray. There it is. There's intruder, there's repeater, there's a sequencer, there's a decoder. It's kind of like the web hacker's dream, really. So if you're passionate about this area, I highly suggest getting familiar with it.
Yeah, I would agree. So that's where I'm going to land next is Burp Suite. Hack the Box has encouraged me and slowly taught me about Burp Suite. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn on this intercept. I'm going to intercept any request that goes to Burp Suite, and this proxy is going to catch it. It's kind of like a man in the middle. And so I'm just going to sort right here. I know that when I click on this button, published, it's going to try to sort all the pages, ascending or descending. And then I captured it right here in Burp Suite. So my next step, as I got familiar with the app, and that's a good approach as well. I'm usually always like, I just want to dive in and start hacking, but I'm not familiar with the UI, the app. So take a minute, familiarize yourself with what you're hacking. All right, so I got this request and I said, there is that call parameter right there. And that references right back to what National Vulnerability Database was talking about. I said, all right, I got this request. I'm just going to right click. I'm going to send this to the repeater. Jake, do you want to give me some more background on what the repeater does?
Yeah, so usually whenever I'm attempting to exploit a vulnerability or find an observation, I'm working in the repeater. Basically, you can enter data into the parameters, hit send, and immediately see the server's response on the right. It's super helpful because you don't have to go back. Like if you're using a browser, you don't have to go back and find the exact input box to enter your information. You can immediately know where it's at, and you can kind of play with it and see that response there.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's really, I mean, from what I've seen, it's a time saver. I'm holding this request and I can repeatedly over and over, keep sending requests, keep changing things. Now, if I look at this request, we know it's a GET request. I want to get data from this URL, and here's all these parameters. And if I look, we see the column here, and we know that the column is evidently SQL injectable. So I wrote down a couple of commands. I've already kind of figured this out. And for the sake of the demo, I'm going to do a manual SQL injection right now. I'm just going to, let's write it out. So what I would do is I'm going to say, all right, where the column is published, add a plus and plus select. This is where I'm going to start doing my SQL injection. Select, and then I said, make the database sleep for 5 seconds. And that should be enough to SQL inject it. And I'm not sure. I have to try it. I got to send it, but I send it. I'm not getting a response right away. If you count it, it's probably 5 seconds. And then if we do this again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, request comes back. I know that. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. A great thing to look for that makes it a little easier so you don't have to count. In that bottom right there, you see 5,052 milliseconds.
Yeah.
So you can see that's equivalent to 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much spot on. So you can increase it to 10 and see if it's at 10,000. It's kind of like a surefire way to know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and this is kind of the first confirmation that we're vulnerable to a SQL injection. We haven't done anything really malicious. I just told the database to sleep 7 seconds. And then, yeah, it says 7 milliseconds, 7,000 milliseconds. And so this is my starting point. I can make the database sleep. And from what I've heard, this is kind of a blind or a time-based SQL injection. I'm messing with time. I'm making things sleep, right?
Yeah, so I can expound on that a little bit. So with SQL injection, most of the time we're dealing with 3 main injection types. The first is error-based, which is best case scenario for a hacker, since it's when the application spits out a SQL error, and we're actually able to retrieve information from the database right there on the screen.
Kind of like this.
There's the SQL error right there.
Yep.
So that's great to have. The second case is Boolean-based, which is when the page is vulnerable. There will be a true page and a false page. So the true page oftentimes will return data, and the false page will be either empty or blank. And then the third possibility that we're seeing here is a time-based injection. Now, I told you error-based is best case scenario for an attacker, and time-based is worst case scenario. It's still critical, but the reason I say worst is that it's often harder and takes longer to retrieve data this way. When you're waiting for the application to respond, there could be issues with that. And on top of that, it takes time, right? You're not getting that immediate string pasted out in the response. You have to use a time-based approach, like we'll show you in a bit here.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and I think from what I've understood and seen, a lot of times, it's trial and error. I'm going to try select all from users or something. I'm trying to inject a query that's going to give me what I want. And I get a bad request. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. It's a lot of figuring out, thinking about what's happening behind the scenes that I can't see. You kind of got to be that detective, and you got to put on your thinking cap. But we've at least exploited it with the time-based, and then I can even throw it simple things just like throw the query off. If I know, standard syntax, I could just say and semicolon. Semicolon's going to terminate that query, and then it's going to say, hey, database error. Select fuel pages dot all from fuel pages order by published and semicolon. So I can see that I'm injecting query language right in there. And it's even giving me feedback. I wouldn't say that that's probably the best approach, to be sending back error feedback that shows, here's the select statement, here's the query that ran, database error. That's probably something we shouldn't do as developers and coders, right?
Yeah. Usually when we're doing a test, we see a SQL error. It's not it's not always a sign of SQL injection, right? You could just be returning an error because you had trouble casting and into a string. It could be completely on the back end, relevant of what the user enters. But having that SQL error echoed back to the attacker shows them, oftentimes what DBMS is in use. It allows them to see kind of what SQL queries you're using, how you write them. It's kind of a treasure trove of information.
Yeah. I mean, hackers as they go. Every time I get something back like this is just another piece of information to help arm me against them. They're collecting data. They're doing that enumeration of looking for all the info they can. Now, once I got to this point, I said, all right, I can do it. I could try to figure out the queries. I could do all that manual work, but I'm lazy. Developers, I always say, are lazy. We're always trying to automate computers to do our work. So I said, there's got to be a tool out there, right? And there is. And it sounds like you're pretty much an expert with SQL Map, which is what we're going to use today. You want to tell us some more about SQL Map, what it does, why we
Oh,
use
yeah.
it?
This has been my bread and butter for the last couple of years. So SQL Map allows for the automation of and discovery of SQL injection vulnerabilities. So it's, in my opinion, the best tool on the market if you're dealing with an injection. So it has, I think, 25 plus or support for 25 plus DBMSs. And basically you give it the target URL, you give it the parameter to look at, and you tell it what you want it to do, and it'll take care of retrieving the data for you. And using this tool, you can take an injection like Noah showed you, where you just, it seemed harmless. You were just making the database sleep for 5 seconds. That can be used to actually pull out data from the DB. And that's, like I said before, your usernames, passwords, credit card numbers. That's where the money's at.
Yep. Yeah.
So Jake, hey, Noah, real quick, we had a really good question. Are there any courses for SQL Map or anything that you would recommend somebody, whether it's just digging in or any kind of training? And Noah, you're a teacher. Jake, you've done a lot of teaching before. Do you have any recommendations beyond using the tool on getting spun up on the tool?
I would say your best resource is YouTube. If you want a more course structure, I would say that EWPTX from eLearn Security I recommended earlier. That'll walk you through some labs. It'll walk you through slides and some data on it. But honestly, if you want to save the money, you go on YouTube. You can find about 100 different tutorials that go into some serious depth on how to use it.
Yeah, I like that. The YouTube is really what I always push as an instructor when it's web development or hacking. I wasn't aware of this tool probably a couple months ago. And the way that I stumbled upon it, I was doing hack the box. I was trying to hack a box. I was stuck. I don't know. So I looked at the walkthrough and it said, open up your terminal and type SQL Map. And it kind of introduced it to me. And then I said, all right, that was cool. I don't really understand it. Let me go get more info. And so I go to YouTube. You can watch other hackers use this tool. I think, Jake, you've also posted a lot of posts on LinkedIn. There's a lot of hackers that share that information. Some of the other things too, there's always the documentation. It's not the most, attractive approach. But if you look up SQL Map, they do have a website. They do have documentation. And you're going to need that as well. So check out their website, sqlmap.org. And you can also kind of dive into their user manual. This helped me as well. So yeah, that's a good question. Can y'all see my terminal okay, or is the text too small? Should I enlarge it?
Looks good to me.
Okay. Looks good to me.
Yeah.
All right, good deal. So once I basically was using Burp Suite and I've seen I can, SQL inject here, I took this query behind the scenes. I put it back to its perfect state where it doesn't throw errors and it brings back data. I copied this all and I put it in a terminal, in a file. So if I go to my desktop, I have a fuel.rec file. And so if we do just the simple hacker, Linux commands that everybody should know, let's just cat the fuel request. You can see this is what I got out of Burp Suite, just copy and paste. So I took it here. This is holding on to that request. There's a couple of things that are important, like the session, these cookies and everything. I want to make sure I want to send that. The first command that I did with SQL Map, let's type that one out. So let me see here. I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste this one. There's a couple of different ones that you can run, but this is what I've come up with. Copy, paste. And let's take a look at it. It says SQL Map -R. So like, what is the request? Hey, read a file, fuel.request. The risk level is 3. The level is 5 -- tables. I want all your tables off of this database. Random agent, just pretend to be a random, browser agent. And then -P is the column. The parameter I'm going after is call. And then I just add fresh queries so you can see it all run in the demo. Jake, there was 2 that I had questions about. The risk and the level. What did risk and level do?
So level specifies the number of payloads to run. So it's 1 to 5. 5 is basically run everything. So it's going to take a lot longer, but it's going to try a lot more. Risk is 1 to 3. So 3, you're maxing it out with both of these. Like I said, risk is basically how heavy of queries do we want to run. And by heavy, I mean length and time it takes to actually run them. So with time-based injections like this one, I definitely would trend towards going higher on the risk. But in most cases, usually you're fine with just the standard no risk and no level. I want to say I think default is 1 and 1. I might be wrong on that. I'd have to double check, but yeah, in this case, we'll need risk 3 and level 5.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's kick it off. Let's see what happens. It's going to spit out a lot in the terminal.
Noah going whole ham right off the bat.
I just want to take the battering ram to the database, break it down, give it all to me. All right. So we can already see a lot is going on. You're not going to probably pick this all up if you're watching the demo, but it's slowly working through. I'm dumping all the tables right now off this database, off this server that I don't have permission to be on. And we'll give it a second. But from what you've seen, it looks like we have a database called Fuel CMS. It has 14 tables in it. I start looking through this. I started looking like, what is interesting to me? I don't care about the blocks, the archives, the category, the pages. But I slowly worked down and I saw, oh, the Fuel users. That might be interesting, right? I want to go after sensitive data. So that at least kind of gives me a first glimpse at the database. And I've SQL injected and now I have all the information of that. The next step, I think, for me, and what I want to always do is I want to steal that data. That's what malicious hackers are doing as well. So I have another query. It's not much different than the first, just slightly modified. But if I paste this one in down here at the bottom, SQL Map, the request is going to be Fuel request. We're still going to go with the same risk and level, just kick the door down. Get me the users, -- users, random agent, go after the column parameter again, and then -- dump, and then -table Fuel users. I want to dump the Fuel users. Jake, can you give me some more background on like how SQL Map is dumping all this data? It seems like it's so crazy that you can type one command out and dump a database.
Yeah. So what's interesting is whenever we were in Burp Suite and we showed that sleep command, that was a time-based injection. But now after we run SQL Map, we can see that it discovered an error-based injection. And we know this because we were able to retrieve all this data you see on the left there pretty quickly, right? If we were doing a time-based injection, we would have to go character by character. And I'm sure you can see that would take a whole lot longer than what we did here. And so what SQL Map is doing is it's issuing SQL queries. Since we're allowed to break in to the already existing, we're issuing SQL queries that are pulling out the database name as well as the columns and tables within that database. So going back before, if this was a time-based, we'd have to say, is the first character in the database name F? And if it is, it would take 5 seconds to delay. And we could say, oh, it's the second character A. If it's not, it would return immediately. And we just go all the way through the alphabet, numbers and characters until we get that 5 second delay. And we know, okay, we got that character, move on to the next one.
Yeah.
So this is best case scenario with an error-based injection. It's kind of immediate. We pull out the string right away, move on to the next one.
Nice. Yeah. So let's go ahead and run this last query and see what happens. So I'm going to run this. And then immediately I'm getting data. It looks like I'm picking up things. I'm seeing the word admin, the Kentoso admin. It looks like we got Bertram Guilfoyle, Silicon Valley reference, Dinesh, Silicon Valley, Richard Hendricks. It looks like I have data here. It's a little unstructured. It's not super readable, but if I keep progressing, it's going to ask me questions. Do you want to store all of the hashes of the passwords? I'm like, yeah, store those in a file. Do you want to crack them next? I'm going to skip it for now. That could be another tech talk. But at the very end, I'm going to have to zoom my terminal out a little bit Let me see if I can zoom it out. Let's see. There we go. It's a little small and hard to read, but I can see the ID over here. ID 1, there's a salt, there's an email. Are they active? What is their password? Now these passwords, they're hashed. They're not stored in plain text. So I guess the next step is, I at least got one step. I have your users, I got your emails, I know their names, I have their passwords, but they're hashed. Can you explain what a password hash is and what an attacker might do with that next?
Yeah. So with password hashes are basically plain text password that's been encrypted. So we, as an attacker, even though we have the hash, we don't necessarily know what the decrypted value is. So it's a secure way to store data. And sometimes with these injections, we'll dig into the database and the passwords will actually be plain text. So that's, from a security perspective, never a good idea to store plain text credentials. But in this case, though they didn't sanitize data properly, they at least are storing it in the back end properly. So like Noah said, we could go further and try to crack these, but it sounds like that'll be a future talk.
Yeah. And this is kind of, it goes into that layered defense, of how do you defend against attacks? And one thing is now I have hashed passwords. I'm gonna have to crack them. That's going to be my next step. So I'm not fully there, but that might be a different tech talk or a different time. We'll talk about how you crack those. So that's a SQL injection. That's kind of what I've gone through and found and learned from it. I think the last big question is, how do you prevent it? How do you not get SQL injected? What are some best practices, like prepared statements, or what else would you do?
I'd say when in doubt, the best thing and kind of the main thing to do, no matter what you use, is properly sanitize all user input. And that can look like using prepared statements. It can look like, MySQL real escape string if you're using PHP. There's different ways to do it. But at the end of the day, it's that main premise of don't just put raw user data into a SQL query.
Yeah, because if you think about it, a lot of the queries are select all from users where the name is equal to, and then it says, what's your username? What's your email? And if I say Noah and select all of this, we're just passing that into the string, and that's just going to be constructed as a query. So we should sanitize, we should use prepared statements. There's different layers that you can do across the stack, whether you're filtering and sanitizing in the server, the front end. The front end's only going to get you so far. Somebody could pull up Burp Suite like we did, and we bypassed the front end. But yeah, that's good. That's really all I have to share. I know.
So Noah and Jake, if you don't mind, I want to follow up with this from a blue team side. We got to hear Jake's red team side, and you're talking about prevention. Let's talk right of bang. What kind of tooling or notification or logging should I be looking at, or should something like this trigger that so that I know that a SQL injection attempt or successful attempt was made, so that I can then do other kind of response actions?
Yeah, I'll let Jake take that one. He's the expert here.
So my perspective is more from the red team. Like you said, I don't have as much of that blue team logging or detection. I'm more focused on the bypasses. So I would probably bounce that one back to you, Noah, if you have any experience in that realm of things.
Yeah, I mean, in just general, I'm not a blue teamer, so if I give weird answers, forgive me. But if I was the developer and I got SQL injected by a hacker, how am I going to respond, right? The first thing I'm going to try to do is figure out, are my SQL statements the first entry point? Let me shut that down. Let me sanitize on the server. Let me sanitize on the front end. But then Monty brought up the other idea. I want to know somebody's SQL injecting me if they successfully did it. I think that gets into more tools or setting up logging. If you ever see a request come down that has SQL syntax in it, maybe we throw an alert. we could parse those strings, those queries, and be like, the query should be this, but somehow another select all from users got inserted. That would be my paranoia, is that, and maybe I block my server to say, I'm only going to take requests from this front end URL. I'm not going to allow other third-party IP addresses to reach out to my server and try to do these things. So that's a good question, Monty.
I think one of the things that we need to, that I know that I would recommend, having been a blue team and SOC analyst before, is I would say we need to make sure that if there are errors, they're not user facing, that they report back into the SOC. Because if they do user face, then now they know in that Burp Suite and everything else, I can manipulate and I can change. Whereas back at the SOC, if there's a error, I want that reported back to me so that then we can go back to the developers and say, hey, we had an issue, or I want to see it. I don't want that going right back to somebody from the external side. That's one of my first triggers.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. If you really think about it, IT, web apps, everything that we're doing, even though we operate in disparate silos, you got the front end team, you got the server side team, you got the database team, and you got the guys and gals who run and make sure the lights stay on, the servers don't go out. We still need to all collaborate. We need to all share information across the board, share logs, share all that info. If you see something that's vulnerable, bring it up, talk with other people, just opening up those conversation opportunities as well. I think a lot of times people stay in their bubble. Like, I'm a front
man, you're so right.
Yeah.
And I think, and Jake, tell me if I'm wrong, as an attacker, you're relying on people to not communicate so that you can cross and stitch things across disparate, because people get their silo of excellence that they're really good at. And when you can go across, you're counting on them not communicating, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as a person in cybersecurity, I want to see that collaboration and that harmony between red and blue teams. But, when we're doing these kind of tests, it's kind of, if a company's not having that collaboration on the back end between those teams or developers and testers, it's oftentimes evident, right? So I think as a whole, the industry should focus on collaboration. That's the importance of talks like this, right? Like Noah being able to be here with you and kind of delve deeper into this issue from both of our perspectives. I think that's what brings the community together.
Yeah. I would say too, real quick, I saw a question came in. I'll read it to y'all. I have a query towards remediation of SQL injection. What would be the better option? Pre-compiled queries or stored procedures? I'd be curious, Jake, your point. From what I've read and researched, and don't take me as the expert here, stored procedures are one way to mitigate SQL injections, or prepared statements. I think it really comes down to what you prefer. That's my opinion. Again, don't take it too far. But Jake, what would you say? Is there a better one between stored procedures, prepared statements?
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think at the end of the day, it's more about, are you sanitizing that input? And it's less about how you're doing it. It's more kind of the end. So focus on not allowing arbitrary input into your queries, more so than kind of how you're doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
An ounce of prevention applies in cyber.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I know we got a couple more minutes. I don't know, Monty, if we want to do some questions, or I got questions too for Jake.
Please do, Noah. You've been asking some good ones. We have just a couple more minutes. I think it's worthy to go ahead and bring this to a real strong close here.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
So let's talk about this maybe. For those people who want to get into cybersecurity, maybe we piqued some interest here today. You want to do a SQL injection, you want to do these things. What would you recommend? Where do they go start?
Yeah, great question. So I would say start with your EJPT. And I know I keep throwing these e-learn security certifications at you. I don't have any affiliation with them. That's just kind of where I got my start. And one of the reasons I like to recommend them for people early in the field is they're cheap. So the EJPT stands for junior penetration tester. It's a great entry-level cert. And so if you're a broke college student who's trying to get into cyber, I think it's $200 last I checked. And it allows for a hands-on black box pen test that you get to do. So you can put that on your resume. And it's a great way to kind of stand out from other competition. And like I said, $200, man, if you're in college, you throw that on your Christmas list, maybe grandma will come and clutch for you. That's a great way to get your foot in the door.
Yeah. And, what I've seen and what I've tried is like, one, I would say just start messing around with things. It's okay to go out there, go make a copy of the Fuel CMS, play with it, see if you can break it, go through the steps of deploying things. There's a lot of resources, YouTube, there's articles, everything is out there in the world. It's all there. Hack the box. I love Hack the Box because it gives me, a brand new box every time, and I get to try to attack it. I know it's vulnerable to something. I just got to find it. And I think in general, the biggest thing that I've learned during hacking is it's frustrating. We made it at least look kind of easy. You saw us do the happy path today, but it's been very frustrating. Make sure you temper your expectations. It takes time. You got to work at these skills every day to become an expert like Jake. So
thank you. And I think that pairs well with something else I wanted to add. So with the frustration that hacking can allow for when you're learning it, it's also true that getting that first job as a pen tester can be extremely frustrating. I remember I had to send out 75 applications, and it just, in my email, I would just see rejection after rejection after rejection. It's extremely frustrating, but I'd say keep your head up, keep at it. And I think eventually with proper networking, you can get in somewhere and really pursue your passion.
Awesome. Well,
that's
Monty,
a great way for us to come to a close. And I would offer it up, anybody out there listening, if you're interested in pen testing and you have some skill, at Horizon 3, we do an assessment of people who want to be pen testers for us, who want to develop code that go into our autonomous pen testing solution. So if you think you've got some skill and you've got a baseline going, reach out to us at jobs@horizon3.ai. And who knows, maybe we'll be the first stop for you and making it a little bit easier than rejection after rejection like Jake got up front. And we can help get somebody started a little bit quicker and faster. So we put that link out there in the chat panel. I've got to tell you, I love getting to see you grow, Noah. You explain things along the way. And Jake, your mentorship on this path today to explain things at a little bit deeper level and help guide, that is absolutely what we wanted to convey here. So thank you both, Noah. Thank you, Jake, for teaching us a little bit more today. We're leaving better than we came in.
Yeah, thanks, Monty. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Noah, you handsome gent. I'm looking forward to the next one when we do this next month. Can you give us a quick idea of what you might be looking to accomplish next month?
I'm not sure yet, but I'm thinking maybe Active Directory, hash cracking, some more cross-site scripting with web. Let us know what you want. Put it in the comments, leave a comment on LinkedIn. Let us know what you want to see.
Love it. So for everybody who thinks that maybe we've scripted some different thing out, we're growing with Noah on this path. And thank you for taking us on this ride with you, brother.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, everybody. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we'll look forward to seeing you in April when we come back for the next Tech Talk on this attacker's journey. Have a great Wednesday, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.